talk to Tom Tudgendhart. Tom is a Conservative MP, former leadership contender, former security minister. He's been chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. He is banned by China himself. Tom, this is hugely embarrassing for the royal family, for the British state, I would argue, perhaps even for the security services. Tell us a little bit about your take on what we know now versus what we knew yesterday.
So I'm afraid I don't agree. I think it's embarrassing for Prince Andrew. I'm not sure it's embarrassing for anybody else.
Okay.
The Chinese state has been trying to get people alongside folk in the UK and around the world for many years. The United Front Work Department is a branch of the Chinese Communist Party that seeks to influence and to pressure individuals. We know almost certainly that they've got many different students here in the United Kingdom who are affiliated to it, who work with it, because all Chinese students sadly have to have some connection to the Chinese state in order to get visas, in order to get out. So, we know that there's I'm not blaming every student, it's not their fault. That's simply the reality of living in a totalitarian dictatorship. And many of them would rather not have anything to do with it, of course. So this isn't something I'm afraid that there's very much we can do about. In general, what's embarrassing is that it looks like Prince Andrew avoided the constraints that are placed on most sensible people by the Foreign Office and by the intelligence services that keep them safe. I'm afraid, Peter, that even in your time in government, when you were a special advisor, you would have come across, if you came across people in the Chinese orbit, you would have come across people who were connected to the United Front Work Department. You just would. But you, like me, like anybody else, was very careful about how you interacted. You took advice from the Foreign Office, you took advice from the intelligence services, and you made sure that you followed the correct protocols. It appears that the Duke of York did not.
Why do you think he got to this stage? Was it the desperation for money, the desperation for connections, perhaps, that meant that someone who is allegedly such a high-ranking spy could infiltrate someone so close to the heart of the establishment?
Peter, I know quite a lot about China, I know quite a lot about intelligence gathering, but I'm afraid I know nothing at all about the Duke of York, so I'm not going to speculate.
That's okay.
on how he may or may not have got there.
Well, tell us then, from your own expertise, tell us how China will have perhaps approached this.
So China is always looking for people to influence various debates. So quite a lot of academics, for example, who are not privileged to intelligence information and are not the sort of people you would think traditionally are the target of spies, will be subject to pressure by the UFWD, as it's called.
So this United Front Work Department, just for our viewers and listeners who are maybe not as familiar as you are with that, just tell us a little bit more about that organisation.
So it's a branch. There's sort of three pillars of the Communist Party. It's one, the PLA is another, and the party itself. And the reality is it was set up by Chairman Mao, so all those years ago when the party was created, in order to sort of bring together those elements of influence, a sort of non-military, non-economic means, well, no, including economic, forgive me, means to influence and to shape, target, and determine action by the party. So it's very much a party tool. It's not a Chinese state tool. It's a party tool. So it's about furthering the interests of the Chinese Communist Party very specifically. And it's an organization that's been going, as I say, since the beginning of the Chinese Communist state about 70 years ago. And it's been going around the world, recruiting academics and influencing different individuals. And some of them are sort of traditional spies, if you like, trying to steal intelligence, sometimes intellectual property from companies, sometimes military secrets, but most of the time it's not that. Most of the time it's trying to do things like shaping the debate, so closing down the debate on Tibet in the United Kingdom, for example, or, shouting down lecturers in universities when they question the Chinese line on Xinjiang or Taiwan or any of these different areas where there's reasonable people have expressed different views to the Chinese state, largely because the Chinese state lies very frequently. And so what we found that these organizations can, proceed very actively. In fact, you may have heard a couple of years ago, while I was security minister, we closed down 4 Chinese overseas police stations. There were a few around the world, and we found some here in the United Kingdom. We closed them down, and they were effectively branches of the UFWD.
Goodness me. And yes, I remember that story at the time, those overseas police stations. So a lot of what you're talking about there in the United Front Work Department, part of the Chinese Communist Party, a lot of it is, I struggle to use the word subtle, but it's less overt than a lot of other bits of spying, a lot of other ways that people might try to influence with the blunt tools militarily, for example. This is a long-term way in which the Chinese Communist Party seeks to infiltrate our society.
Right. Look, I mean, nobody would put the words of Prince Andrew and intelligence in the same sentence. This isn't about intelligence gathering. This is about making sure that the party has influence around the area and is able to bring together the various different people that it wants to seek to influence them. So what they're presumably trying to use the Royal Duke for is to make sure that they can, have access and influence to other people. So I don't suppose for a second they were interested in, if you like, spying on Prince Andrew. I suspect what they were looking for was his ability to bring people together and get other people around the table. Although, to be fair, the Chinese state does have a remarkable respect for elders and has a very, very hierarchical impression of things. So perhaps they thought that he had more influence than he did.
Yes, it's interesting about the level of influence, because certainly since he's been out of public life and a royal who is not a working royal, certainly things have changed. But I mean, do you think this is just illustrative of how much Chinese influence there is in our society? Should we take this story perhaps as a warning about how many Chinese spies there will be in so many parts of our society?
Peter, look, this is the point I've been trying to make for the last 10 years, as you know, and it's one of the reasons I'm sanctioned. It's because, people have a view of sort of China as hostile, meaning, they're out to sort of James Bond-like attack the United Kingdom. It's not that at all. What it is they're trying to change the way in which the global economy works so that it centers on Beijing and not on, London and Paris and Berlin and Washington and other places in the sort of free world. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to make sure that their companies and their products set the norm so that they're able to dominate the coming economic century. Now, I understand why they're trying to do that. I just think that's a very, very bad idea for the United Kingdom. And my job, let me be quite clear, is to put Britain first. And in defending the interests of the British people, I think it is my job to stand up against Chinese influence in the United Kingdom, against the pressure that they're bringing on British businesses, against the pressure they're bringing on British individuals of whatever rank and standing, and making sure that British people are able to live free and have the economic prosperity that they deserve from the energy and imagination of their own efforts. Now, that's, I would have thought, a pretty clear and obvious thing to do. Sadly, I'm afraid we've found over many years that some people think that the job of the government or a job of others is to build alliances that don't deliver quite what we need. Now, alliances are great, but they're there to make the British people stronger. They're not there for the artistic decoration of the writing.
What would you say to people who say China's a fact of life, it's an economic superpower, we have to deal with it?
Of course we do. Of course we have to deal with China. That's completely obvious. The question is how we deal with China. And as far as I'm concerned, we should deal with China in an extremely cautious manner. We know, this isn't a secret, we all know that the Chinese Communist Party is seeking to influence the way in which people do business around the world, and the way in which they study, the way in which they think. We've seen this sort of pressure coming in companies like TikTok, which the algorithm is written in Beijing. So whatever you post, you may think that you're posting freely onto a social media platform, but it's not like the other social media platforms. The other social media platforms are simply interested in making money. Now, you may or may not like that, but they're pretty open about what they're trying to do. They're trying to make cash. TikTok's algorithm is written in Beijing, and we don't know what the algorithm is written to do, but we do know that it responds differently, very differently, from the other companies, which suggests that there may not be the same simple financial motivation, and that there may be other motivations. So this is certainly a relevant concern. And given that it is a publisher, after all, an algorithm is a way of choosing how you promote or which bit of news or which bit of dance video of cats or whatever it happens to be is seen by who, you find yourself realizing that actually one of the major publishers in the United Kingdom is controlled by the Chinese state. So, we need to be aware that that is the situation we're dealing with. We need to be aware that the reality is that China has different interests to ours, and that as a dictatorship, it's able to bring the resources of the state through various different arms. Now, I think my job is to protect the British people. That's what I'll continue to do.
Just finally, Tom, do you think this H6 person should be named? Do you think that should be in the public domain?
Well, look, I'd like them to be. I suspect they won't be, but I would like them to be.
Okay. Tom Tudgendhart, thank you very much for your time this morning. Appreciate that. That's Tom Tudgendhart there, who is the former chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. He is former security minister, former leadership contender and current Conservative MP as well.